BYU obviously is doing work in the transfer portal. 4 additions on Monday. I don't hear many complaints anymore about BYU being slow out of the gates when it comes to the transfer portal. Now, do I? I'm not trying to tease y'all. I'm just being very clear that BYU, it was going to come inevitably. They were always going to go out and find top shelf talent. And they did that on the offensive front. I think BYU's 2 losses to Texas Tech this past season showed BYU where they were lacking. And a big part of it was along the offensive line. I'm not saying that BYU's offensive line last year was Swiss cheese. I actually thought it was a pretty dang good offensive line, but Texas Tech showed how much further BYU had to go along their offensive line. And TJ Woods, Aaron Roderick, Kalani Sitake, I think they all saw it, and they have endeavored to do something about that. And 3 transfer signings yesterday, I think, are going to help in that mold. They are Zak Yamauchi from Stanford, a 6'4", 325-pound offensive lineman. Next up, Utah State transfer Junior Sia, another Mountain Ridge prospect who went to Utah State for 3 years and is now transferring to BYU as an offensive guard / tackle. And then finally, Paki Finau by way of the University of Washington, a 4-star prospect in high school out of California. BYU's actually recruited all 3 of these guys at different points during their high school or college careers via the transfer portal and other means. And now they're all members of the BYU football program. This is an offensive line that's going through a transition. You saw Isaiah Jada, Waylon Lapuaho, and Austin Leusa exit the program. There are 3 holdovers from last year's offensive line, and actually 4 I consider to be guys who've got starting caliber potential in them. Those include Bruce Mitchell, who's one of the highest rated offensive linemen and offensive linemen and centers in the country, who's coming back for his final season in Cougar uniform. At the guard spots, Sonny Mocassini and Kyle Safarchuk split time with Austin Leusa and Waylon Lapuaho and acquitted themselves quite well on the interior. They're figuring to reprise those roles. And then at right tackle, and potentially could move to left tackle, you have Andrew Gentry. So you have a lot of bodies already there at offensive line. That doesn't also include some of the young talent BYU's got out there. Think of guys like Ethan Thomason, Andrew Williams. Man, who else am I thinking of? There's a really, really strong young contingent of offensive line. Joe Brown, Caden Chittister. Like, there are so many guys. Trevor Pay, Brigham Alexander. Man, there's bodies in this offensive line room. But I think that TJ Woods, saw exactly where BYU was lacking, and he's endeavoring to do something about that by adding guys, like I mentioned, in Junior Sia, Paki Finau, and Zak Yamauchi. I'm butchering this here, but Zak Yamauchi. They're coming into BYU with the mindset that they're going to be starters at BYU, and they should have that mindset coming to BYU because they have that capability within them. All of them pretty highly rated transfers. Paki Finau now, I think, is the highest of the bunch, in my personal opinion, coming to BYU by way of Washington. But all 3 of them, they've got skill sets, I think, that fit exactly what TJ Woods wants. And what that is they're taller offensive linemen who have got expansive frames. In the case of Zak Yamauchi, 6'4", 325. That's a big body to work with. Junior Sia, they list him at 6'5", about 310 pounds. And Paki Finau, similar, 6'5", about 305, 310 pounds as well. I think all 3 of them have capability of, at minimum, being a 2-deep player for BYU. That means they're listed either as a backup or a starter. And especially in the case of Junior Sia and Paki Finau, they are built in the mold of an Austin Leusa, in my opinion, where they have the versatility to play offensive tackle or offensive guard. And that positional versatility, man, it's very, very useful. In the NFL parlance, they're called swing offensive linemen. In some cases, they call them swing tackles, but their ability to either play right guard, right tackle, or in the case of Austin Leusa, who I thought at any given point at BYU could have played any one of the 4 spots not named center, that is valuable stuff to have. And I think that's what BYU's hoping for from Paki Finau and Junior Sia in particular. The best news about this is all 3 of these guys have multiple years to develop in BYU's program. In the case of Finau and Sia, they've got 2 years of eligibility remaining. So they're not going to come in and be 1-year guys. They're going to all of a sudden be in the program and be right back out. They've got the capability of coming in and contributing for multiple years. And in the case of Yamauchi, he just finished his freshman campaign. He's got 3 years in addition to a redshirt year available to him as well. Offensive lineman in the transfer portal, for those of you who may not be aware, is one of the higher priced positions in the transfer portal because offensive linemen, by and large, are very much developmental prospects. No matter how good many of these offensive linemen are when they come out of high school, there is a need for them to be developed, whether it's physically, their skill sets, learning the game, and speaking of playbooks and the like. And with all that time invested, when guys of this caliber, we're talking starting caliber, if not at least depth pieces at the P4 level, when they hit the open market, guess what? They command a premium. So understand that these three guys did not come cheap for the BYU football program to add them to their roster, but also understand, I think it's a concerted effort on BYU's part to make sure that their offensive line, it's as good as it possibly can be. And the hope is when they go up against the likes of Texas Tech once again, or get into the college football playoff, that's the goal for BYU, is that when they get into these matchups, their offensive line is not going to struggle like it struggled in those two matchups against Texas Tech. Outside of that, BYU's offensive line last year was very, very strong, but all you got to do is look back, especially that Big 12 title game, and watch how difficult it was for BYU to block Texas Tech's defensive line. And Texas Tech, they paid a premium to get the talent they had on that defensive front, but those are the type of guys that if BYU aspires to get where they're going, and that is to be truly a Big 12 type contender, if not a college football playoff contender, you have to have elite line play, especially along the offensive line. Running backs can't succeed without an offensive line that opens holes for them. Quarterbacks can't be as good as they hope to be without an offensive line that keeps them clean in the pocket and allows them to make plays out there. BYU was, I think, solid in that department all year long last year, but Texas Tech showed that while you may be at this level, if you want to get to the next level or the next levels, here's what you need to do. And hey, it's a hard lesson to be learned, but I think BYU's been proactive in trying to address this concern, and I tip my cap to them. It was an expensive day probably in the transfer portal yesterday. These three linemen, in addition to a guy like Kedu Luave committing to BYU, those are three high-priced additions for BYU, but it shows that BYU, much like we've talked about since they joined the Big 12 Conference, they are in it to win it. They want to be a force in the Big 12. They want to contend for a Big 12 title, truly. They don't want to be playing a distant second fiddle to Texas Tech or anybody else. They want to be competing for that title. They want to be playing for a national championship in the college football playoff. And as former BYU offensive line coach and offensive coordinator Jeff Grimes often said, the offensive line, it has to be, quote, the tip of the spear and lead the way to have that success that BYU hopes to have on a national level. So a lot of good work being done on a Monday for BYU, a busy day for yours truly, because like I said, I've done two versions of this podcast, but nonetheless, great stuff. It's a great day if you're a Cougar fan out there, because that's some major acquisitions in the transfer portal. And I think we can all relax now, understanding that, BYU's not sitting back and letting the portal pass them by. They are being very strategic, but at the same time, their caliber of player is pretty elite. And if you didn't see this, by the way, via on3.com, the highest average rated player committed via the transfer portal, Notre Dame has the highest rating at 84.67, this is according to College Football Zone, College FB on X. Number 2, BYU at 79 flat, tied with USC at 79 flat. So that shows that BYU, they're not bringing in maybe mass numbers of players, but the players they are bringing in, pretty darn good, according to the talent evaluators out there in the portal. So nice day if you're a Cougar fan in terms of the transfer portal and the work BYU accomplished on a busy Monday.